Welcome to the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera, a celebration of Bill Hanna, Joe Barbera, and the thousands of people past and present who have shared in their entertainment tradition. Here we go! And now your host, Greg Ehrbar.
Thank you, Chris Anthony. Welcome to the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera. I'm Greg Ehrbar, also host of Pop Culture Classics, and I want to welcome to our program somebody I've wanted to talk to for a really, really long time, Mr. BRIAN LEVANT, who is a renowned director of some of the biggest movies in Hollywood history. He is responsible for great TV series. He has probably one of the few, if any, who have revived IP, as they call it, good and correctly, with love and respect, and also brought it into the contemporary. He is an author. We're going to talk about his books, but most of all, he's a real swell guy. Welcome to the show, BRIAN.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that lovely introduction that also serves as a eulogy, I guess.
Well, you know, we gathered together today to talk about your life and your toys.
And they are intertwined. For instance, this is a Hanna-Barbera. So let's talk about how I got the Flintstones.
Yeah.
Okay? Because this is where the toy collecting comes into play. And so I had heard, maybe there was something in the trade, something, that they were doing a Flintstones movie. Yeah. And that they were looking for a writer. I don't know how information like that would have trickled down to me, who I'd made 2 movies, but I'd only taken 2 meetings in the movie business. I'm not very established or comfortable in it at all. And I said to my agent, hey, I'd love to work on a Flintstones movie. See if you can get me in there. And he calls me back a few days later. He says, no, they found somebody, but they'd like to meet with you as a director. And no one was more surprised than I. But, you know, Beethoven had not only been an enormous success, I was not the original director. I was brought in before I had actually finished my first film, Problem Child 2. Universal thought that was the end of the movie. And instead, it grossed a huge amount of money on an $18 million budget and fostered 6, 7 sequels as well. Anyway, so I guess on the basis of that, I got in the room and I prepped my ideas, everything I'd say so carefully. I got into a room during his lunch hour shooting Jurassic Park on the back lot, Steven Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy. And this is how I talked for 10 minutes. And they actually seemed to be used to that. And I said to myself, pull yourself together, idiot. You're blowing this. And I did, and I made a credible case for myself as somebody who literally grew up watching Hanna-Barbera shows from Rough and Ready, That's All for Today, from Rudolph and Jose, and our friend Jimmy Blaine.
Wow, the original, wow.
The closing by Hoyt Curtin, and was there for the first episode, not only of Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear and Quick Draw McGraw and the Flintstones, that I knew it well. And more than anything, I took a Polaroid, this is how long ago this was, of my Flintstones toy collection, which then numbered 25, 30, maybe 32 tops. Nothing great. You know, just, hey, that's a nice one. And when I handed that to Steven, he lit up. He saw somebody whose relationship was different and somebody who recognized it as not just being IP, that it was something that you lived with, something that you thought about. And from there on, he was very, very enthusiastic. I think he liked the fact that my take, because they're always looking at what's your take, and it has been reported. I don't remember saying it, but it's been reported to me that my take was, it's the Flintstones, we'll make it funny. But I think it was something that was not ironic, something that didn't make fun of it, like the Brady Bunch enthused and the self-parody. I did not want to do that. I wanted to do real people living in a Flintstones world, you know. And Yes, I mean, I knew the Honeymooners well, too. Studying to be a comedy writer, that's part of 101, is to watch the classic 39 and know them inside out.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this, just to jump ahead for 1 minute, that Hanna-Barbera, when I said, you took this from the Honeymooners, right? No. Bill and Joe, steadfast. Oh, no, 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 no. Laurel and Hardy, all Laurel and Hardy.
Well, you know what? It depended on the time and the place when they were being asked. Sometimes Hannah would just say, we wanted to pick a show that we thought was one of the greatest shows, and he said it was The Honeymooners. Joe would say, oh, they didn't have a Polaroid camera. But the fact of the matter is, the critics, the publicity, nobody denied it at the time. However, Jackie Gleason got sued by Philip Rapp for the Bickersons, and nobody talks about that. And yeah, Sons of the Desert is the Honeymooners, is the Flintstones.
It's a lodge, right?
But yeah,
right.
it's like, I guess by then
Well, the henpecked husband, I think,
they got sick
comes
of
more
hearing it, so by
from
then they
Laurel
were
and
like,
Hardy.
stop. By then I guess they were just over being asked.
In any case, I got the job, and I'm sure one of the reasons was because you couldn't find anybody who do this for less money. And I began 23 months of working in Bedrock, slaving away in the quarry. And it was an immersive, creative experience that called into action virtually everything I knew about design, about film, about animation, about the Flintstones, and trying to do as faithful a recreation of the cartoon as humanly possible, but to also imbue the film with a genuine humanity, and that it wasn't a cartoon. But certainly the cartoon influence is tremendously strong. I think the process, as I kind of learned it, was like learning to speak in a different language. And that language was, how do you build a world and creatively utilize bone, stone, and skin?
Yeah.
And, the brilliant production designer and William Sandell, who ran with me on everything, and the most talented group of artists, both in our art department and in our partners, the Jim Henson Creature Shop of London and Industrial Light and Magic. It was the only collaboration between the three organizations.
Wow.
Steven very much wanted us to use Stan Winston, who done Jurassic Park, who did The Terminator. I met with him. I saw a film that he had directed with a gnome, and I felt that there was not a drop of whimsy in him or his team. And my kids were young and watching a tremendous amount of Henson, probably the Fraggle Rocks and things of that era. And I knew that they had done, like the David Bowie movie and things where they were really moving in animatronics into a performance medium. And it turned out to be a really good choice. And, it's tough when you're working for someone like Steven and you say, we want to go a different way. But he always respected those decisions, even if he didn't like them. I was joined on this.
Wow.
Yeah. No, there was another one he actually paid to show me. We had Jay Leno as the host of Bedrock's Most Wanted on TV. He wanted TV to be animated. To me, it just wasn't the reality, And I said, I like the idea. I don't think it's right. And he didn't pursue it.
What was funny about the way you directed that is you recast Fred and Sharon Stone and Halle Berry, and it was in this sort of, they're not really acting, or they didn't have any real resemblance or personality, and it was insulting to the people they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was exactly how that kind of awful TV
recreations. Yeah. Every day was exciting because you were creating. The greatest fun in the world was like, designing this world, designing the cars. Yes, we want to do the Flintmobile, and Barney's car, is always just kind of a sharpened, we call it a pencil car.
Yeah.
It just had this point. So we converted that into two so we could put 4 people in it. And the other ones that we created, not only in the first film, but the second film, the Cadillac, the Sabertooth 5000, which was made of petrified wood. It was gorgeous. Fred's sports car. And then we did like the Ram truck, which was a giant ram's head, and a Volkswagen Beetle, which was literally the carcass of a beetle, just to make the things look like a 59 Cadillac, to get that grill, and using those prehistoric kind of cylindric cone fossils that you find, and made the grill out of that stuff. There was just no end to what you could do. One shot, she walks into their refrigerator, and everything on the shelves had to be designed. And it's like, okay, what is the frozen vegetables? It's Bird's Eye, but you changed the Bird's Eye bird logo into a pterodactyl. Everything you did was filtered through that. Designing watches, the Movado watch, the old triangular electric watch of the late 50s, all these crazy little design things, and the furniture in the house, translating that 1962 modern, the kidney-shaped coffee tables and things, and the art on the wall, right above the Flintstones couch in the living room. We had the Les Cow cave paintings, and just designing it, 6,000 props, wardrobe, sets, vehicles, and 22 creatures.
Wow.
It was joyous. And at one time, we had 100,000 square feet of stage space at Universal, where we were building the houses, the sets, the props, the car, everything. And that's when I met Bill and Joe for the first time, to take them on a tour of everything we were doing.
Oh, wow.
And
didn't you pick them up in the pencil car? Was it?
Yes. I picked them up in Barney's car at Amblin. And actually, to get to the main road to stage 16, I think, where we started, you had to go up a hill, and the car was losing traction. I managed to keep it from sliding backwards. I was very nervous about that. But we got there, and they were very quiet. And I said this in my book, My Life in Toys, when talking about it, that I believe they expected to be terribly disappointed. I think that, it had germinated for so long, and Amblin they're not people who share scripts. To get a script, they had people who were furiously stamping numbers on every page, so the things that went to people did not get circulated, or they figured out a way to type it in red so it wouldn't Xerox.
Yep, yeah, I've seen them, yeah.
And so they did not share the script until later with Bill and Joe. And so we walked in, and first of all, the hundreds of artists who were working on the painting and sculpting and carving foam and shooting foam over, chicken wire armatures to make the sets and things. Hundreds of artists, all of whom were thrilled to be working on it because they grew up with it. They loved it. And then to have the guys who created the world that we were recreating walk in and look at their work, and Hanna-Barbera were blown away. They, like I said, they expected, I don't know what they expected. They did not expect what they saw. The scale of everything was ginormous, and it is so true to their construction, to their scale. And it was joyous. It really was. We went from stage to stage, and I always refer to it, they kept giving each other these little old married couple looks,
Yeah, they were total opposites.
And when we finished, we left the largest stage at Universal, with stage 22, which was top to bottom. All of them were. We step out into the light, and, I want to, well, what do you say, guys? And they just stood there, and Joe Barbera shook his head, and he said, "Never in my life did I ever expect to see anything like this. And I told them we were just getting started, and we were. And it was always a thrill and a pleasure and inspiring to be around them the few times when they did visit us. And the cast was over the moon the only thing, Bill did not like the size disparity between Fred and Barney. I think in his head, Barney was bigger. But, John Goodman was 6'5". I think Rick Moranis, 5'9", 5'8". And, he just had a different picture in his head size-wise. They loved the characterizations. They certainly got a kick out of Elizabeth Taylor playing Pearl Slaghoople. And we did our best the Flintstones was a very white world. And we did our best to do something about that in all of our casting.
First of all, you actually liked the source material, which, and this is not just a recent issue. It's happened before where they've put a person who wants to fix what they feel was broken about the original, and they have a lot of disdain for it. And that's happened repeated times. I'm not going to even go into specifics, but we kind of know. And it is a huge, huge thing to say about Steven Spielberg that he didn't dismiss you as, okay, this guy's too into it. He's not going to be objective, because that happens as well. They saw that you could deliver the goods as well as you loved the product and you loved the IP, and it was more than that. That was the combination you always brought, because you brought Leave It to Beaver into a new era.
And, he liked that I knew that his office was sitting on the site, that the exact place where the Cleaver's house was, before they moved it up to Colonial Lane.
But that's the thing, is that it's a tightrope walk. Times change, tastes change. How do you blend the both so that nobody walks away feeling like, well, that's not my Flintstones? And people also walk away saying,
people did.
Yeah.
Let's be fair. They criticized our choice of Rosie O'Donnell as Betty, and I thought that Rosie was brilliant and knew more about the Flintstones than me or Bruce Cohn or Colin Wilson put together. Let me tell you, when we had lunch with her, all of a sudden, she broke out in the Twitch. Yep. There's a Bedrock, Twitch, which we had the BC-52s perform in the movie. That was all because of her and her knowledge of it and her enthusiasm and her ability to uncannily recreate B. Benadet's laugh.
It's great to have people in the film that are, like you said, the cast was thrilled to meet Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
It's great to have people in the film who are glad to be doing these characters and are having fun with it. You can tell.
Well, but nevertheless, John Goodman had enough. Amblin at one point had plotted to do 2 sequels back to back, a la Back to the Future. And John Goodman did not want to wear a dress for another summer. No, I think too many people came up to him and said, I love you in Big Lebowski, that they were yabba dabba doo.
But
Right.
it also gave you a chance to make the sequel a fresh take, because the sequel was not just it over again. It was a movie unto itself.
Yes, and I'm trying to find more love for it these days. I've been pretty down on myself. Even though I think we were so successful in a lot of ways, we never connected with the audience in the same way. And I don't know if potentially it was a lack of star power, or if people, as my wife once said, well, once they've seen the clothes in the cars.
I don't know. I love the first one. It was my big date movie. When it came out, all of my friends were like, oh, if they don't know who Jean Vanderpyle is and that's thing, then she's not going to be right for him. And I saw it over and
She does appear in it, in the conga line with Elizabeth Taylor barely made it through with her bad back. This is a good time to talk, because on June 2nd, the new Flintstones 4K Steelbox, terms I've never heard before. 4K, I went, Dean Cundy, our esteemed cinema photographer, the man who reinvented visual effects cinema photography with the Back to the Future movies and brought his magic to the Flintstones. We went back, we looked at the film and retimed a lot of it. In those days, believe it or not, you had to time your CG shots before the rest of the movie, independent of everything. So it was a best guess. We did a lot of color correcting. There were a lot of things that just got blown out, in the massive sun in the quarry and things that we were able to now color. I mean, you have so many tools at your disposal, as opposed to when we did Flintstones, you add 1 point of red. Bring it down a quarter stop. It's so archaic, the world we made the Flintstones in. Still, the CGI technology was new. And I cornered Spielberg one day in the hall and I said, hey, it would really be helpful for me to see if you could let me see Jurassic Park. So I really have a better idea of what's possible. And he goes, sure, you can go see it June 6th. Well, that was opening day. Like I said, they ran a tight ship. So our visual effects shots, our CGI shots, weren't shot with 35 millimeter cameras. They were shot with VistaVision cameras. And they had it so to get a larger frame to work with. This shows you how incredibly things have changed in 30 years. That you had to use a different camera and you couldn't move it. You could only move within the frame optically. You could not use certain lenses. And it took a long time. But those 53 shots now look great. I always dislike it when you see film on TV, the CGI shots, it loses something for me. But I'm very happy with the transition that we did. The film looks great. It sounds great. They got a slew of extras from what I understand. Dean and I did a little hi. So the Flintstones lives, which is a nice thing to happen. This is 32 years now.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Yeah, and I believe it was last year or the year before, Amblin sold a package of films to Netflix. And the Flintstones immediately, when they put them, jumped into the top 10, which was incredibly surprising within the industry. And it just shows, how the Flintstones are embedded in our culture. And this is 66 years. This is longer than the Beatles. This is, no, seriously, it's like, they were smart guys. Post Cereals used to sponsor Rough and Ready.
Yeah.
And when Huckleberry Hound debuted in 58, which was syndicated, they had an they call it a billboard sponsor was Kellogg's. And not only were they sponsoring the show, but you got Huckleberry Hound and Yogi Bear on your breakfast table with you. And Post made the deal for Fruity Pebbles cereal. 1968, is it?
68 was
Vitamins.
Vitamins, and 71 was the Pebbles. And Flintstones are the only characters that have been national products than any cartoon characters in
Yeah, yeah.
The Vitamins were actually the final Jeopardy question.
Yes.
The final Jeopardy question. That's how.
We know the answer. What was the question?
Well, it was. These characters appeared on Vitamins since 1968, something like that.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is that a lot of these things sort of get dismissed, a lot of Hanna-Barbera in particular, because it's just fun. It's simple fun. It's not lofty in any way, and that's fine. But there's a tendency to not value it as how it really touches people, because they have to keep rediscovering. A lot of their stuff keeps coming back because people like it, because they have an intimate connection with the characters who are in their homes.
Yeah, no. Besides the 2 Flintstone movies, I also did 2 Scooby-Doo movies for the Cartoon Network, which was seriously probably the most fun I've ever had all around. The Flintstones was an incredible creative experience and growth experience for me, but the pressure that accompanied somebody who had been in the movie business, months, to perform what was just really a heavy weight to bear. And with Scooby-Doo, and I was not the biggest Scooby-Doo fan, I was in third grade when the Flintstones premiered. Of course I'm going to be watching. Where am I going on Friday night? In 1969, on Saturday morning, I was in a basketball league. I had a girlfriend. I had a car. I didn't have the ingrown affection of something that I'd grown up with. Joe always wanted that Scooby-Doo movie. Scooby-Doo was really his favorite, I think.
You know what? He loved putting a dog in something all the time, and Scooby was the ultimate dog character.
Yeah, well, and let's also recall that he was a late addition, that they were trying to do a horror show for kids, and this was a way to satisfy the network, who I believe was Fred Silverman at the time.
And Ruby and Spears. It was all of them.
Oh, right. Joe.
He was in charge, and Iwo Takamoto also.
Yes.
The design, everything about that just worked. And it was Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. It was the cat and the canary.
Yes, very much so. So I got involved because I heard they wanted to launch a movie and then a weekly series. And because of my Flintstone credentials, I did move to the front of the line. And I had a wonderful first meeting with the studio and the Cartoon Network. Even though I blanked on Daphne's name, I had to work around that. And we saw like 400 kids. I was offered by Chuck Roven initially the first Scooby-Doo feature. But to me, they were still working from the Mike Myers when he was involved with it in his script. And as I said, it wasn't an authentic version of Scooby-Doo. The whole thing about stealing kids' souls, I told them they're going to have trouble with that, and they did. They had to do a lot of rewriting after their previews. But at one point, I said to Charles Roven, couldn't they just all be in college? They're trying to go somewhere for spring break, and they end up in a van with this crazy guy and his dog, and then something happens, and they have to solve the mystery and become a team. And that is basically the formula that I applied to Scooby-Doo, The Mystery Begins, which was the first origin story. I always felt they were college age. This knocked them down into high school. Only one of them drove.
Shaggy.
Yeah, and working with the Altieri brothers, Dan and Steve, everything came together so well. And like I said, we saw 400 kids. And when Robbie Amell and Haley Kayoko and Nick Pilatus and Kate Melton walked into the rooms, I said, that's going to be the person, and they were. Their youth, their enthusiasm, they'd all had parts, maybe a couple lines in places. I mean, Kate was 15 years old, living on her own in L.A. Mel was the oldest at 21. They worked so hard. They were so great and so eager to succeed. They elevated the experience. We were shooting promos after production, and we're doing it on my birthday. And my wife says, what do you want to do on your birthday? I said, well, we can just have a dinner with the kids. And she thought I meant our kids, not my Scooby kids.
The meddling kids.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, and then to repeat the experience and getting to bring Dean Cundy into that. And, the budgets were tiny budgets. We spent on the first one, which had, I think, 230 CGI shots. We spent $7.5 million. They were so fond of it, they seriously considered releasing it as a feature. And to that end, they did a theatrical test. And we scored 89 to 87, higher than the original Scooby-Doo tested in its final form.
Wow.
Yeah, and that cost $80 million, and the sequel cost $125. Our sequel cost $7.5.
Well, do you find sometimes, because you've worked with every single budget, that if you're working on a limited budget and for television, that you're not going to have the elaborate set pieces?
But we did. That's the beauty of the school. Even though, truth be told, in order to make the film work, we had to cut the biggest, most fun scene. We were able to achieve those things. We call it outsmarting the budget.
Right.
You just have to think differently. But, there are people who go out and they'll make a great movie for $33,000. You know, sometimes unlimited budgets isn't the best thing that can happen to you.
No, no, that's true.
Witness my film Jingle All the Way. Like 20 years ago, something was happening. Every time I go speak on campus somewhere, you know, after the kids would come up with these worn out VHS copies and say, could you sign this? My family and I watch this every year. I go, really? You're still watching VHS?
Just like a Christmas Story, it was a bomb. So was It's a Wonderful Life.
Jingle All the Way is definitely a Phoenix story. The American Cinematheque ran it last holiday season, and the place was sold out. It was the best screening we'd ever had of the film, and it's such a change from 1996, where it was just a bitter disappointment. I felt that way creatively because of the response that we got. Somehow it's embedded itself in the conscience, and I'm thrilled. What was an embarrassment is now something I can be proud of. I was proud of it then, but I was, you know, you get pummeled like that from every direction. It can't help but to influence your feelings about it. Quite seriously, the 26-inch beautiful Turbo Man figure that is prominently displayed and the object of a final pursuit in the film, I got one of those, and it sat in a box in my garage for over 20 years. 26, I think. And finally, the film's reputation had been restored enough that I took it out. I got a very nice plexiglass box and put it in my office. You know, I say we have a lot of catching up to do.
Isn't it kind of sometimes because of the nature of the film, if it's a big movie, if it's a big budget, the critics and the media tend to focus on how much it costs and not whether the movie is good in it. And in the case of the Flintstones, all I ever heard about the Flintstones movie, 32 writers.
Oh, more than that. I'm happy to discuss this because they had done, I think, 5 different attempts at the script before I ever took a meeting. That totaled a bunch of writers. And so they hired a big name writer to do a script for $500,000. This is what I was chasing, right? And so we're waiting for the script. We started, you know, hiring people, Bill Sandell, and doing some initial scouting, which, by the way, everything in the Flintstones, with the exception of one helicopter shot in the movie, is shot within the zone, the 30-mile radius of the intersection of Sunset and Vine, believe it or not. Every shot. The quarry is 5 miles north on the on the Hollywood freeway from Universal Studios. We used all the old, and especially in the second one, we used all the old Western locations. But we used Vasquez Rocks.
Vasquez Rocks is where they shot the first Lost in Space episodes, too.
Right, yeah. No, Star Trek. The Cisco Kid, it's in everything. Yeah. So finally, the script comes in and everybody gets their stamp number copy. And there was a meeting in the morning. And basically what happens is we're all there with these long faces because it wasn't fun. And Steven comes in and basically says, well, what do we do now? Seeing this whole thing going away again for them, especially for me, I said, you know, in TV, once in a while, and this is true, we'll throw out an episode on Wednesday night and shoot a new one on Friday. Mm-hmm. And he lifts an eyebrow and he goes, really? And so I said, all right, you set the hook. I said, yes, you give me 2 weeks and $25,000 to hire some people, and I will do what we do in TV. I will gather some very strong writers and joke writers, and we will take the parts of this story we like. We will expand on those, and in 4 days, I think we promised, and not at all in the same meeting, but very quickly thereafter, we'll work out the story. We'll bring you in. We'll pitch it to you. And if you're happy, we'll do it. I brought in a team of 7 other writers. I think Steven only knew one of them because their kids went to school together. And we worked in the dining room at Amblin, set up for the first time a large screen monitor to do all our work on. And anyways, Steven loved the story, had a couple of very good suggestions for it. We went off and working 7 days a week. I think in the 11 or 12 more days, we turned in a script. Casey Silver, who was then the president of production, called my office to have lunch the next day, which I figured he made the lunch so he could say, thanks anyways. It didn't work. Instead, he said, we're very happy with this. Keep going. And as we continued, people had jobs to go to. They were on hiatus from shows and stuff. So we'd bring in different people, and we did a couple different drafts. And a lot of times the studio wanted one more thing, and they brought in Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel to write one scene. And when you put it all together, there was a lot of writers. And we were condemned by the Guild. The writer who we had rewritten screamed bloody murder to the Guild. I'm getting screaming calls at 10 at night from Frank Pearson, the writer of Dog Day Afternoon, the president of the Writers Guild, screaming at me, how dare you? How dare you, and violate the whole premise of the Writers Guild is that there is a single writer, and that is the responsible party. And I've just ruined that. The only person who defended me, publicly and privately, was Mel Brooks. Remember, Mel Brooks grew up on Caesar's Hour, your show of shows, the greatest writing staff in the history of history, right? You had Woody Allen, Mel Tolkien, the executive producer of 13 Years on All in the Family. You had Neil Simon. You had Mel Brooks, Carol Reiner. You had the model for Rosemarie's character on the Dick Van Dyke Show. Larry Gelbart, who adapted MASH into the iconic series, did Funny Thing Happen on the Way to the Forum. And this was the environment that Mel Brooks learned to work collaboratively in. And him and Carl Reiner, who taught Gary Marshall, who in turn taught me this method. And I'll say this for myself professionally. I'm pretty good at running a table. And we had some very, very talented people. They were excited to be working on the Flintstones. They were excited to be working where Spielberg would drop in every now and then and sit down and pitch with you, And so I think Tom Pollock, Steven told me, said, I think if it wasn't for the writers thing, we would have made another 30 million. So great. They would have made 380 million instead of 352 million. And we took a hit on it. But in my eye, we salvaged this, that we accomplished something that many writers had failed to do. They couldn't get the train to leave the station. We got the train to leave the station. And truly, if they weren't happy, they wouldn't have made the film. That's not the Amblin way. Yeah. They're not going to, we got a commitment. We're going to make them. No, that's not the way they thought.
It was an easy joke for somebody doing a monologue to say, Citizen Kane was, Orson Welles did in Flintstones, which you're going to make a joke about the Flintstones, which is not very, but it's easy to say how many light bulb, to right, a light bulb. It's a real easy joke. It's also an easy dismissal. But the proof was it worked. It did save the movie and people loved it. I worked in advertising. We had a huge room. We used to gather on Wednesdays, 24 or more people, we would start with a great big thing. Right. Then it would move into smaller groups. Then it would move. And then finally, okay, here's the concept. Who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? And it got smaller. And then you would sometimes bring it out again. Animations, the exact same way. You did what had to get done, and you did it.
We did it, and in fine fashion. And the largest Memorial Day opening of all time at that time. And the fact that we did, I think it's $230 million overseas, when number one, there were half the theaters overseas that there are today. And you did not have China, but even in Japan, where they never played the Flintstones. And that is why you get so many odd Japanese-produced Flintstone toys, is because they were just kind of making it black and white. We'll just make up the colors. We'll give them green hair. They're cartoon characters. But somewhere where the characters were unknown. did huge. Europe, Latin America, Los Pica Piedras, muy bien.
You know, that you mentioned, and since you have millions of toys, and a lot of these are in the book, the Barney with green hair, the Betty's, that they always had the Betty fixing her hair Betty,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's wonderful to collect those and see those because they're hysterically funny.
Yeah. You know, well, we should talk a little bit about Bill and Joe in the sequel in Viva Rock Vegas. They did appear, both of them individually, because they were so busy in their 80s that they couldn't even be together for one day. But for the sequel, they were around more. I love Joe Barbera. Bill Hanna, he got along much better with Bruce Cohn than I for some reason. But Joe and I were palsy, and I admired so many things about the man. His vitality. This guy was still cool, and he's 84, you know. And then let me tell you, Paul McCartney has nothing on him. You know, seriously. I mean, he always looked great. His beautiful clothes. You know, he dyed his hair. He had hip sunglasses. He was youthful in spirit, and as my grandmother would say, a real starker, a strong man. You know. And I have found, I once was lucky enough to have dinner with Chuck Jones. And after years of growing up and reading the obituaries of animators, 94, 97, 89. Joe Barbera was what, 94, 96, I think. I always figured these are the people who spent their lives doing little more than trying to entertain children. And they found joy and success in it. And in return, it blessed them with these long, long, productive lives. Yeah. And you have to be a little bit jealous of that.
They made cartoons. They were cartoon makers. They loved making cartoons. And they were also, and I say this a lot on this podcast, sorry folks, they were dedicated to keep those doors open, to keep people working, to hiring fresh talent, to hiring people who no one would hire because of insurance. They loved what they did, and they loved having people who would do it for them and with them. It was an incredible place to walk through.
You know, it's a sad remnant today. But, you know, they were giants. And so when they appeared in Viva Rock Vegas in the finale as guests at Fred and Wilma's wedding for the second time, they appeared in cartoon form. Was it Pebble's wedding?
It was I Yabba Dabba Doo.
Okay, all right. I knew I'd seen him somewhere. Anyway, so they sang along with the Flintstone song and took pictures with everybody. And Bill was not as well then. But like I said, Joe's amazing. And once again, just to have them around and together. And the only other time I saw them together was at the launch of the Boomerang Network. That was a wonderfully festive event that I spoke at. And Getty Taranovsky, did I pronounce his name right? The creator of the Cartoon Network guy. He brought the audience to tears, telling the story of seeing Tom and Jerry growing up as a little boy in Russia and how his whole life from that moment on was focused on becoming an animator. Stoney Curtis was there, and,
he was?
and people like Marvin Kaplan, and a lot of the voice people. June Foray was there. It was really great, and they got up to speak. Bill said a few words, and then Joe launched into like a 40-minute speech, and poor Bill Hanna is like, he's holding on to the rail, because Joe went on and on. But they were, I kind of refer to this as the icon stage of their career. And I think the Flintstones movie had a lot to do with the beginning of that, where their work was being continued and evolved. And they benefited from that in many ways. And I think most of it was that they got the recognition that they didn't get. They weren't like Walt Disney and Walter Lantz and hosting their own cartoon shows. You know, they were behind the scenes. They didn't take credit. If anything, they shared an excessive amount of credit. Always gentlemen. And I just always had such a pleasure to meet them. When Joe's autobiography came out. What is it, From Brooklyn to Bedrock?
My
Yeah.
Life in Tunes, yeah.
Yeah, My Life into right. In the mail, I get a copy of the book, and I open it up, and there's an inscription to BRIAN LEVANT, the genius who brought the Flintstones to life, Joe Barbera. And then 2 weeks later, I got another book. Same book, same inscription. He must have forgot. But I figured the sentiment was real, not just something he was, if he did it twice, word for word, he had to have meant it. But
that's great. You have two of them.
Two signed copies, yes.
It's like Viewmaster. Wow, how many times has that happened where you got the heartfelt autograph 2 times?
For somebody, who did grow up with them on the TV, with them on the breakfast table and beyond, and to get to know them, and Hoyt Curtin was such a lovely, lovely, talented man. Before you score the film, you don't make original music till the picture is locked, right? And all of its testing iterations and all the showings and stuff for the Flintstones, the music was from the show. Yeah. And a lot of that found its way through different orchestrations and stuff. But some of it was so pure, like the sad Flintstones theme that they used to play on a B3 organ with a Leslie speaker. I mean, we did that like note for note. And by the way, David Newman, who scored both the Flintstone films, did both of the theatrical Scooby-Doo movies and did both of our Cartoon Network movies. Someone who learned not only from his Academy Award-winning family, but also was a big fan of Hoyt Curtin's work, particularly his theme songs, which they smoked. Let's face it, man. This guy got you off and running. I actually said once that few Hanna-Barbera shows could actually compete with their theme songs.
Right away, hearing Rise and Shine, near the opening of the film. First you hear the twitch in the car, and then it's like you see the neighborhood and you hear Rise and Shine. It's like, I'm here, we're here.
Da, 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 da. Some of these things become embedded in your head.
The teaser was the theme, and everybody in the theater went nuts.
Yes, we did follow the bouncing ball. Here's the thing about the Flintstones. A lot of our success was due to the fact that our teaser was attached to Jurassic Park. And it's on the new box set. And you'll see it's not even a Fred Flintstone skin that John's wearing. And yes, we did follow the bouncing ball. That was Kathy Kennedy's idea. Then the ball came and John Goodman caught it and said, yabba dabba doo. And then boom. And this was my contribution. Coming Memorial Day, 1994. And I said, AD.
I really enjoyed Viva Rock Vegas too, because I see it as a different film. In some ways, I don't know if the budget was different. I'm assuming it was.
Believe it or not, the original Flintstones film was made for $48.5 million, a bargain when the average price of a holiday film was somewhere around 90. Viva Rock Vegas cost 76 million, I think. During that time, all salaries in town went up 12%, and there were many more CGI shots. Mm-hmm. It was a more ambitious film, even though the cast didn't get paid what the first one did. It was a longer schedule. We probably could have done it for less had we been forced to, but no one was forcing us, really. And lastly, well, it still bugs me that, okay, so this is encompassed in the premiere. One of our writers, Harry Elfont, comes up the aisle. And, there was a very nice response and stuff. And he looks at me and he goes, all those talky scenes, what were we thinking? So that's the kind of thing that kind of haunts you when the writer says it.
Well, and he went on to co-write Josie and the Pussycats.
So exactly. Very good.
Yeah. There you go. But I enjoyed it because I found it, there was an opportunity for more color palette.
The design is fantastic.
It was a lot more reds and magentas and stuff.
No.
And also the soundtrack albums were different because the soundtrack album for the Flintstones was a little bit more contemporary pop. They were
Yeah.
promoting it as that, whereas the Viva Rock Vegas was more party, good time.
Please remember that another one of my favorite ideas. We got Ann-Margrock
Yes.
to sing Viva Rock Vegas. And we went to meet her at her house. And as you walk into the room where we met her, there she has an animation cell from the Flintstones right by the front door. So, it's not something she hid. And I got to meet Roger Smith, too, her husband. And I said to him, with the exception of Roscoe Connors, I've met the entire cast of 77 Sunset Strip.
Did she speak at all about being obviously she did it because she was pleased with having been associated with it. Did she express happiness for having done it?
Oh, yeah, no, she was thrilled to do it. And she also said, I guess this is my tribute to E, meaning Elvis.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And it did bring it full circle because there she was.
It did. I mean, who else is in Viva Las Vegas and the Flintstones?
That's right. And you had a different cast, but also a really capable cast who gave different takes, but also very faithful.
No, Kristen Johnson and Jane Krakowski had both come off very successful award seasons. Mark Addy had come off the Full Monty. What a wonderful, lovely, lovely man. And I think he struggled with his accent a bit. And, we had the woman who takes all the English actors and, he couldn't quite get there. Although he did 4 years on a series playing an American after that.
Could it be said that perhaps, and, there's no guarantees with any creative work how it's going to be accepted, that when the first Flintstones came out, as you said, you had the Jurassic Park lead in.
Right.
And also, there was a blitz of publicity. It was the first one everywhere. And Cartoon Network was showing marathons of Flintstones.
Yeah.
By the time Viva Rock Vegas came out, a lot of years had gone by.
Yes, too many. Five.
Yeah. And it wasn't running. They didn't do a marathon. It wasn't running. That's the way I felt about Rocky and Bullwinkle. Nobody was seeing the show on a regular basis, so they weren't making the connection. You know what I'm saying?
The thing about the Flintstones that's different than, say, Rocky and Bullwinkle is that the Flintstones, they did audience research. They found that 99% of the audience had strong familiarity with the franchise. Now, other than like Mickey Mouse, I don't know where you're going to find that kind of overall awareness in the American public today. It's kind of staggering.
Well, you still can't go into millions of, with all due respect to Mickey Mouse, who paid my salary for many years. You can't go into every retail store that sells cereal or vitamins today. It's a staggering thing that exists. And probably many, many kids think, oh, well, they're just the mascots for the cereal like Snap, Crackle, and Pop. But be that as it may, it is evergreen. And I think that one of the things I think you gave to all of us was a lot of these kind of experiences that have become evergreen, just like the shows they did. But also, I really do agree with you that the amount of attention that came on this film, reminding people how much they loved this, how generations loved this, gave Bill and Joe that, it raised their profile and their achievements again. Because really, the fact that when you showed them the set and they were like, we would never have dreamed this, you gave them that, And
those are people with giant imaginations.
Yeah, but circumstances and budgets and time and all of that stuff, because you were in television, you knew how to deal with that. And then Steven Spielberg, who said, I want somebody who doesn't just think of it as an IP. I got to repeat that, because if anybody's listening who has IP, remember that.
Well, it's a commodity today. It's a different business than I started in, and
you don't have to be a fan. Like on Scooby-Doo, you weren't a fan, but you have to hire somebody who gets what it is.
Well, I'll tell you what I told the president of the Cartoon Network. I said, I don't believe that things like this need to be bad.
Yeah.
I'd seen too many of them like that lacked authenticity and affection. And it's so easy to fail. It's so hard to succeed in making things what you imagine the public imagines it to be. And I think on the Scooby-Doo movies in particular, we're very successful in that. And I think, on the Flintstones is so dear to my heart. I'll have to send you a picture of my Flintstones collection because it's a whole room. And it's something that I've been living with since I was 8 years old. And over the past 35 years or more, when I started collecting it and doing the films and literally being surrounded by it in my house. I'm a caveman. What can I tell you?
Let's quote the Fred and Barney show. We're the caveman. Yeah. All right. Brian Levant, thank you for all you've done. Thank you for what you don't even know you're doing for future generations. You never know what people are going to pick up on, and the Flintstones certainly is going to be an evergreen, just like your series and stuff. So thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for sharing so much of yourself and your creativity with us. Folks, the book is My Life and Toys by Brian Levant, and also the Flintstones being reissued, looking and sounding better than ever before with sparkling bonus features in a steel book. Yeah. Thank you, Brian Levant. And also, folks, on our other podcast, Pop Culture Classics, Brian Levant will also talk about his other mammoth contribution to society, Happy Days, the history of it, and his brand new book all about that he wrote with Fred Fox Jr. But that's a whole other podcast, so look for that. But until then, I want to thank you again, Brian.
My pleasure, and we'll see you on the Pop Culture podcast.
Okay, and thank you all for listening, and until then, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed the fantastic world of Hanna-Barbera with Greg Ehrbar. Please join us again, and many thanks for listening.